On today's episode, I've got a really exciting case study to break down with you. This guy made multiple millions of dollars just by signing a piece of paper. He did it all in less than a year. He just closed on this. We had a call. We discussed all the details. He broke it down, how he found it, how he put it together, and how you can replicate this. I was really excited. I've seen this, the power of commercial real estate and utilizing this strategy. That's why I wanted to bring it to you today, talk it through with you, and show you so that you can start looking for these opportunities in your market or really any market. So let's get into the deal, taking 1.5 million bucks and turning it into $4 million just by signing a piece of paper. Okay, so this is my friend. His name is Blake, and he was looking for a deal, and they came across a deal up in Michigan. This was an 80,000 square foot warehouse, right? So 80,000 square feet. There was a manufacturing facility in there. We're talking, metal building. It's 30 years old. And the bad thing about it, and the reason why it was on market and nobody wanted it, was it was vacant. Nobody was renting this place. So the landlord, the guy that owns it, he's paying the taxes. He's paying the insurance. He's paying the maintenance. He's paying the repairs, and no money is coming in. The company that owned it ran their business out of it, and they're an international company, and they had shut down that plant. Okay, so they don't need it anymore. And now they're holding on their books. They're hemorrhaging money. And so they put it up for sale with Colliers, right? So it was listed with a large brokerage. This was not he found a needle in a haystack. This was a deal that literally everyone in real estate knew about. It was blasted out there. And the Colliers crew said, hey, you want to sell this fast? Let's just do the auction process. If we do the auction process, you're going to get, bids. It'll close quickly and you can be done with it and have it off your books. And this company decided to do that. They didn't necessarily need to get top dollar for it. They just wanted to be done with it and for it to not cost them any more money. So they listed this thing for $2.5 million for 80,000 square feet, which, that in of itself is not a bad deal per square foot. You think about, 80,000, $2.5 million divided by 80,000, not much. No offers. No bites, didn't work. They dropped the price to 2.2. Then they dropped it to 2. Then they dropped it to 1.75. Finally, I think they dropped it all the way down to 1.5. And my friend caught wind of this and he said, well, let's make an offer of $1 million and see what happens. And you may think, okay, I could do that. But I was thinking about this and I'm like, would I really have done that? Because just because you can buy something cheap, and just because you can get a lot of square footage for $1 million, is it really a smart deal? Is it a good deal? Because the tax bill is $80,000 a year. The insurance is $20,000 a year. The utilities, maybe nobody's using it, but the utilities are going to cost you something to keep the water and the power on. And if you borrow money, you're going to have a mortgage payment. All this with no income coming in. So is this really something that I want? But these guys decided to step out in faith because they had a plan, and I'm gonna break down the plan with you and talk about that. But they made the offer. They got countered at 1.2, and they accepted the 1.2 offer. Okay, so now they got this deal under contract for 1.2 million, and you may be thinking, who cares, right? It's an on-market deal. It's got a lot of risk on it. Got some hair on it, and you're not really showing me anything groundbreaking here. And I'm not, right? Because there are a ton of vacant buildings out there, right? It may be vacant dental. It may be vacant office space. It may be vacant industrial, maybe vacant flex warehouse. You can buy vacant multifamily. And the thing is that stuff sells cheap because they're driven by the income that it produces. The value of the building is driven by the income. So when you go and take a vacant building to a bank, they don't love it. They may not be too apt to loan on it because they know there's no income coming in. And if you try to sell it at a cap rate, well, the investor wants to know, well, how much cash is it producing? Well, it's actually producing negative cash. Well, it's still worth something, right? The sticks and bricks and land, but it's not really getting its full value on the income approach. So they put it under contract, and here's where they really shifted the deal. And this is how they turned $1.5 million or 1.2 million into 4 million. They put it under contract with a 60-day due diligence period with one 30-day extension. Okay. They immediately got to work. And what they wanted to do was get lucky. They wanted to make some magic happen. And how you do that in commercial leasing is you place a tenant in that building, right? They looked at what everything else out there was selling for or renting for. And that kind of warehouse space is going for, $8 a foot, $10 a foot, $12 a foot. And when I say a foot, I mean, if it's $10 a foot and it's 80,000 square foot building, that's $800,000 a year in rent divided by 12. Okay. So they knew that this building was valuable to somebody. Somebody would want to rent this property. They just had to find who needed this space. And they talked to the broker about, hey, do you want to go out there and find us someone to lease this up? And he's like, well, no, because you don't really own it. And, I don't know if I want to do all that, which is crazy to me that was the broker's response, but it was. And so what they did was they looked at this place on a map, right? They zoomed in on Google, they see the building, they see the outline, and they just zoomed out. And they identified, okay, what other buildings within a 20, 30 mile radius of this place have a similar footprint, right? This means that it's already a business that's renting a warehouse that maybe it's 30,000 square feet, maybe it's 200,000 square feet, 100,000 square feet, but they've got a big building. So that means that they need a big building and they want a big building. And maybe they're not happy where they are. Maybe they need more space. Maybe they need less space. Maybe their landlord is working on a renewal with them and he's jacking up their rent and they can't afford it, or they want to find someplace that's more reasonable. That was their thought process. And so they go and they identify, okay, here's a building. They're going to Google it. They're going to find the number. They're going to call that company. And usually it went nowhere. And then they go on to the next one, and they go on to the next one, and they go on to the next one. And they found in a town that was about, I think, 15, 20 miles north of their property, or their property that they had under contract, they called this brewing supply distributor, right? So this is not somebody that actually makes brewing equipment and tanks and all that stuff, but they're a distributor. So they buy, from overseas, they wholesale, they buy direct from manufacturers, and then they resell it to different companies across the United States. And this was their hub. And they called him, and here is something really, really critical. This was part of what their secret sauce was. So listen closely. When they called, they didn't ask to speak to the CEO. They didn't ask to speak to the owner. They're probably not going to get to that person. They said, let me talk with the accounting department. Let me talk with your finance department. And so, it's pretty simple to route on a cold call. You call a company and they say, oh, I need to speak to, billing and finance and accounting and invoicing, right? As they get into that department, if they can get to that department head, that person is probably already a C-suite level employee or close to the C-suite level employee, right? Think about the CFO for the company, right? He's familiar with the books. He knows what they're paying in rent. He knows if they want to move. He knows if their space is too big or too small. He knows when their renewals are coming up on their leases. He's very privy to all the financial data of that company, right? And so if he is interested in this, he can bring that and bring that borrowed credibility to the CEO, to the decision maker, to the boss man who will say, yeah, let's look into this. Or, no, we don't want to do that. Right. So I thought that was really intriguing. Instead of just calling and talking to the secretary and saying, hey, you guys looking to, upgrade your space or get a bigger space or pay cheaper rent, which probably wouldn't have gone anywhere. They just asked directly to get into the accounting department. And once they were in the accounting department, those guys know exactly what they want. We need 60,000 square feet. We need this. We need loading docks. We need these size bay doors. We need heavy three-phase power, whatever it is that they need for their requirements. If you have that, then yeah, we're interested. And so they uncovered after about 50 attempts, right, which didn't take them all that long. He said it was less than a week of calling people. He identified this company that said, well, yeah, we're in 100,000 square foot space. We really only need, 60 to 70,000 square feet. We don't need this much space. Our landlord is kicking us out. I don't know why, but they need the space. They're going to sell the building. They want to sell it vacant. I don't know why the landlord was kicking them out, but that lease was ending. And they were looking at a brand new build. They were building some other flex warehouses, and that person was asking for $12 a foot triple net. Triple net meaning they had to pay $12 a foot plus the taxes, plus the insurance, plus the maintenance repairs, pretty much everything other than the roof and the parking lot. And so that's a big budget, right? These guys got 80,000 square feet for $1.2 million. They've got a lot of room to negotiate a pretty reasonably priced lease and still make great money. And so they began talks with this company. Company came and toured it. They had some requirements. They wanted them to do this. They wanted them to do that. And there was going to be about $150,000 in upfit, repairs, etc. that they wanted. They also wanted to be able to take the space but not have to pay rent until January, because that's when they were going to be moving out of their old facility. So they wanted 6 months free rent in this new facility, so they could transfer over their stuff without having to double pay. And long story short, they ended up negotiating a lease of $6 a foot gross. Okay. So that's also kind of, they were giving away the farm. My friend Blake giving away the farm a little bit by negotiating a gross lease. So $6 a foot, the landlord pays the utilities, the landlord pays the taxes, the landlord pays the insurance. And so those are costs, but they had caps on them of saying, we're only going to pay for this much utilities. They had historical financials on the property. So they knew, hey, these other prior users were much heavier power users and they never went above $7,000 a month. So we're going to cap the usage at $84,000 a year. If it goes above that, then the tenant has to pay it. If it goes below that, which it most likely will, well, that's more money to our bottom line. That's more money to our NOI. And so they were willing to make that concession to get the deal done. And so on the flip side, now these guys are essentially paying $4 a square foot triple net plus the expenses. So a really, really, really attractive lease for these guys, right? So they can take this new building and they can move in, they can lower their expenses. It's, 1/3 the cost of the property that they were looking at leasing, in the other town. And it's a win-win for each piece. It's a win-win for each part of the deal, right? The tenant is happy. They're getting the upfit they want. They're getting 6 months free rent. They're getting their utilities paid. They're getting their taxes paid, their insurance paid, and they just got to pay $40,000 a month in rent. The buyer, right? He now has an income stream on that. And what they did was they signed a lease with this company, with the brewing distributor company. And it was like, hey, this is a binding lease, but it's contingent on us closing the deal, right? Because they didn't even own the property yet. And so they signed that lease. And so the day that they closed, they already had a tenant in place. The bank loves it. The investors in the deal love it. They love it, because I'm going to break down, what does that mean, right? What is the value of that building now? We know it's sold for 1.2 vacant, so that's the value vacant. But let's run through the math of what it's worth now. So $40,000 a month, that's $480,000 in gross revenue. If you back out their utility costs, let's say they max out every month and the utilities do end up costing them $84K a year. The taxes, they're at $44,000. We think they're going to go up to about $80,000 after the purchase. And then the insurance is quoted at about $20,000 a year for the insurance. So You add those things up, it's about $200,000. Okay. So that leaves over $296,000 in net operating income. So net operating income is how appraisers and banks and buyers and investors evaluate commercial deals. They look at, well, how much, if I paid cash for this property, how much yield am I going to get on my cash? And in this deal's instance, it's going to yield about $300,000 a year in cash. And so you divide that by the market cap rate. So if the market cap rate is, let's say, a 10% cap rate, you're going to take that 300,000 and you're going to divide it by 10%, 0.10. That's pretty easy math. It gives you a figure of $3 million. That's really, really, really conservative. And this building is worth more than a 10 cap. At an 8% cap rate, the building's worth $3.7 million. At a 7% cap rate, the property's worth $4.22 million. And the cool thing about this deal, the lease that they negotiated is 5 years with a 3-year extension. Every year, the lease goes up by 3%. So year one, it's $40,000 a month, right? Year two, it goes up by about $15,000. Year three, it goes up by another $15,000, $16,000. Year four, it goes up another. It goes up and goes up and goes up. By the time, that the lease is up, 8 years times 3%, that's 24%. Plus it's also compounding. So it's really going to be closer to 30% more, right, on the new NOI. And so the new buyer is going to look at that and say, well, maybe I'll pay a 7% or an 8% cap rate today, but in the future, it's going to turn into a 9% or a 10% cap rate for me, which is really attractive as a buyer. Also, you got to remember, they're only getting $4 a foot, whereas their competitors are getting $6 and $8 and $10 and $12 a foot. And so there's a lot of room to grow, right? Let's say in 8 years, this lease comes up for renewal. Well, anything's on the table. They could come to them and say, hey, you've been paying $6 a foot gross. We want to do $6 a foot triple net. So you're still going to pay $480, but now you have to pay the taxes, insurance, and the power, right? They may go up to $10 a foot, but it's, gross still. I don't know how they're going to figure it out, but there's meat on the bone for the next investor to buy that and to make money as well. And so, exiting at a 7 to 8 cap is not entirely unreasonable for this because, one, the rents are going to continue to go up and improve the cap rate. And two, there's meat on the bone for the next buyer, in year 8 to renew that lease at 10% more, 20% more, 30% more. Who knows what the market's going to be at that point, but they're already at like 30 to 40% of the fair market rent. So they're way under what other tenants are paying. And so there are kind of two schools in commercial investing. One is guys that buy for yield, right? They're looking at what is my yield? What is my cash on cash return? How much cash do I put in there and how much money can I make in free cash flow? The other school of thought with commercial investing is price per pound, right? Price per pound, like 80,000 square feet for $1.2 million. Like I'm paying, what, $17, $18, $19 a square foot. I mean, maybe even less than that. I mean, like this is an incredible deal for just the poundage of how much building I'm getting for this price. And even though there's, risk on the deal or the rents may be low today, when I go to renew that lease, I'm going to be able to really, really increase the value of the cash flow and the yield on this. And so the guys that are willing to kind of take a little bit of a risk with, hey, they're locked into a kind of a crappy lease, but we're going to be able to renew it, or hey, we're buying a vacant building, but we're going to be able to find a tenant in the due diligence period, and we're going to be able to sign a tenant in place. Those are the guys that make these double and triple and quadruple their money type deals in this exact scenario. So 1.2 million, plus 150,000 is 1.35 million. They're going to have some carrying costs. They're going to have some closing costs. Let's say that even if they have to bring another $500,000 beyond the 1.2, they're still in for 1.7. And now the building's worth 3.7 at an 8 cap, 4.2. So there's a $2 to $2.5 million spread on that deal just by signing a piece of paper, just by signing that lease. And as soon as that tenant is in there, right, they can sell the building, they can refinance the building. They may refinance and pull all their money that they put in for the down payment. They may pull in all their renovation out because the bank's looking at like, wow, they've got, 7, 8 years left on this lease and it's got 3% escalations and it's a great company with healthy financials. Yes, we will loan you $2 million against this building because we think it's worth 3.7. And so that now they've paid everything off. They put a couple $100,000 in their pocket and they're cash flowing every month. Let's talk about free cash flow. $296,000, that's the NOI, but that doesn't include your debt service, right? So the debt on this, they're going to be getting a $900,000 loan, 7.5% interest. They're having to put down, $300,000 initially, plus more for the carrying costs and the rehab. And so that debt payment is going to be about $80,000 a year, right? So you minus, 300,000 minus 80,000 is 220. So $220,000, that's $16,000, $17,000, $18,000 a month in free cash flow after they paid utilities, after they've paid taxes, after they've paid insurance, after they've paid their mortgage, which is also amortizing down and going down every month. That $900,000 goes to $895, $890, $885, $880, as that mortgage gets paid down. And so it's a great way for them to build wealth, to cash flow. I believe their plan is after a year, they're going to go ahead and flip it. They're going to put it back on the market, sell it, take their money and book it. They're holding it for at least a year to avoid short-term capital gains tax so they can pay a little bit less in taxes. They could refinance it out, put some money in their pocket. They could just cash flow it and hold it. But that's their business plan. That's what they want to do with this property. And so what I'm trying to get across to you guys is if you think about, you can do this in any asset class, right? And most people, they don't want to do it because it's scary. It's hard work. Like, imagine I'm trying to sell you a deal. I'm just going to use multifamily and it's 95% occupied, right? And it's bringing in $100,000 a month. We've got very little delinquency, very little vacancy. Everything is tuned up. Air conditioners replaced, roofs are new. Like, it's beautiful. You're going to pay a premium for that product, right? You may have to pay like a 6.5% cap rate on that. And maybe they're already at the top of the market with rents and there's really not much to grow. And you just kind of hold it. It's easy to run and you cash flow a little bit and you pay your debt down. And in 10 years, you sell it and you hopefully make a 10 to 15% return. But there's way, way less risk, but there's not a whole lot of upside. Versus if I go to you and I say, hey, let's look at this apartment complex and it's half empty, right? It's in a good area, but it's half empty. It needs $500,000 in renovation. The tenants that are there are kind of crappy. Some of them aren't paying. There's a lot of delinquency. It's going to be work. But you may be able to buy this for 50, 60, 70 cents on the dollar versus 95 cents on the dollar or 100 cents on the dollar, because it's so easy to run. And here's the difference though between commercial and multifamily, right? As you take over that multifamily property, how long is it going to take you to clean it up? How much cash are you going to burn? How much issues are you going to have filling up all those units and getting rid of the tenants that aren't paying and putting new tenants in? I mean, that may be a 1 to 3 year process, right, to do that. Whereas in this, they took a heavily distressed asset, totally vacant, right? But it was in a good location and it was in good shape. And by placing a tenant, bam, overnight, they're bringing in $40,000 a month, $40,000 a month, $40,000 a month in income. They're pushing the NOI up to $300,000 fairly immediately, right? I mean, I know there's a 6-month, deferred rent type situation, but it's already almost June, by the time that they start paying rent, it's going to fly by. And the bank looks at that. And so if you're willing to look at the problems, right? These guys had a problem. They've got a vacant building that's not making them any money, that's costing them money. They don't have a tenant. they're not marketing for a tenant. They don't know where they can find a tenant, and they don't really want to rent it. They don't want landlord. They just want to get rid of it. That's a problem. But it's going to make it your problem if you don't do anything about it, right? You're going to have to pay the taxes. You're going to have to pay the insurance. You're going to have to pay the mortgage on it with no income coming in. And so the magical part of this deal is they insulated, mitigated, and solved that risk before they even closed by rolling up their sleeves, picking up the phone, being creative, getting in touch with the decision makers, offering a great deal, offering incentives, and getting a lease in place. And by doing that, they were generating $2 to $3 million with not a whole lot of risk on the table anymore, because when they close, they already have the tenant in place. So if this is something that you want to do, copy the playbook. Go in your market. Look for some vacant stuff. Look for some stuff that's been on the market a long, long time. Look for the problems, right? And then when you find it, try to find the solution, right? Try to find, hey, let me talk to some leasing brokers. Hey, do you know anybody that's looking? I'm happy to pay you a commission. I've got this space under contract that I'm looking to rent. I'm going to call companies directly. I'm going to, because guys, that leasing commission is worth what to a broker? Well, you got, let's just call for easy math, $500,000 a year times 8 years. That's $4 million in rent over 8 years. And they're going to get probably a 3 to 4% commission on that, right? So $4 million times 1% is 40,000 times 4% is $160,000. So you're calling a guy, giving him a $100,000+ commission opportunity. You think he might be willing to share, hey, yeah, I've got this group that's looking for X, Y, and Z, and put a deal together with you. And if you're going to an in-place tenant, hey, how would you like to cut your rent in half? How would you like to lock into a long-term lease, and we'll pay all your utilities and taxes, and we'll pay all the triple nets for you. It'll just be gross. How would you like to get in a better situation? How would you like for me to help you so that you can help me solve my problem over here? And this is all it is, guys, is creativity, putting these deals together. And obviously there's work involved, but how hard would you have to work to put $2 million in your pocket? I mean, that's a lot of risk and a lot of effort to put that all together, to go out there and earn it, or to take on projects to make that happen. I think it's worth it to pursue this avenue. So one thing I didn't touch on was the debt and the money. You may be thinking, well, Jennings, this is great, but I don't have $300,000 for down payment. I don't have $150,000 for the upfront. I don't have money for the broker fee. I don't have money for the carrying costs. What about all that? They didn't either. They didn't have that money either. But somebody did, right? And they connected with a third party, right? A partner, and said, hey, we need you. We can get this loan, but we need somebody to bring cash. You're going to have to bring, $500,000 to $700,000 in cash. We don't need it all at once, but we're going to need it over the course of the next year. However, we can make, $1, $2, $3 million in the course of a year or two. Does that intrigue you? Does that interest you? We already have the property sourced. We already have the tenant ready to go. Maybe we already even have the tenant lined up and lease signed. And you can tell somebody, you put in $700,000, you're going to get back $1.4 million. There's people out there, or you go to 7 people, you put in $100,000, you're going to get back $200,000. This is the creativity. Instead of thinking well, I can't do this and I can't do that and I couldn't do that. Who could? Who has the leasing leads? Who has the vacant building leads? Who knows about this stuff? Who has the money? Who has the banking connections? How do I build the bridges with them? How do I build the partnerships with them? How do I get them what they want, right? They want to put their capital into something that's safe, that's, as close to a sure thing as it can be, and they want to make a good return. And you give people those things, they'll help you get what you want. And that's how they did this. So they did this with an on-market deal. They just found the leasing agent, or not leasing agent, but the tenant, by just calling. There was no rocket science in it. They just looked up the 50 closest companies and called them, and they found the money, right? They got the bank, they got the down payment, they got the carrying costs and the rehab and all that stuff. And I would bet that if they wanted to keep it, they could go right back to the bank after that rental period has seasoned a little bit and refinance out the full investor boat, all his $700,000 that he's put into the deal, plus the initial loan. Now, their free cash flow might go down a little bit because they got a bigger loan, but they don't have risk on the table anymore of their own principal in that deal. So if this is interesting to you, or you find something like this, hit me up, shoot me a message, shoot me a DM, shoot me an email, and let's talk about it. See if this is something that we can connect you with somebody that can help you get it done, or we can help you ourselves. But because this isn't the only deal I'm working on. I'm working on a very, very similar deal with another guy in the deal room. And I can't get into the details of that right now because it's still in flux. But this is not just a one-off thing that's never going to happen again. It's a repeatable model that can be done over and over. So have a great week. Unlock your life. If you enjoyed this episode, shoot me a message. I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you.